What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome back to another edition of the Truck Parking Clubhouse. I'm your host, Michael Lombard. Hope you guys had a fantastic weekend. You're staying safe out there, whether you're at home, you're parked, wherever you're at. Just a great reminder as we get rolling. About a little over an hour ago, Taillights issue 44 dropped in your inbox. Covering some great stuff happening, some stuff going out throughout the weekend. You might remember some AB5 legislation that's been kind of the buzz over the past few years, but no action. But it looks like some of the first fines have gone out in California for some AB5 enforcement. So some labor stuff, as well as a new bill that got introduced in Congress that goes along with some of the other stuff we've been talking about in the newsletter. And this bill would fine motor carriers for knowingly hiring unqualified drivers. And we got a great health tip in there for you, especially something you can add to your morning routine. We've got a survey in there. We'd love our trucker members to fill out, and some partner codes for you guys in there if you're looking for some safe parking tonight. But without any further delay, I want to bring my good friend up on to the clubhouse, long awaited, Fast Lane Felicia. What's happening?
Hey, what's going on, Michael? How you doing?
Fantastic, man. It's great to have you here on a Monday night. How are you doing? Where are you at?
Well, I am sitting here in Hesperia, California tonight. Ran into some storms coming up on Cajon Pass here, and some accidents and some heavy traffic. So just decided to pull it on over for the night. So that's what made me available tonight, and it worked out good with the timing. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you're staying safe. That's a great kind of piece of advice, especially going into this time of year. I've already seen videos in Wyoming. A good friend of mine, a good friend of the show, Aubrey. She's up in. I just saw on her Instagram story. She's up in Wyoming, so the snow is coming, and I think it's always a great time of year to remind drivers just in general, like there's really no shame in just hanging out for a little bit, waiting for some things to pass. It's always better to be safe than sorry, really, especially with just how the roads have been, this year alone. It's better to be safe than sorry. So I'm glad you're safe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was one of those I was supposed to pick up tonight, but you know what? It's no load's worth it. So that's why I went ahead and pulled it on over. I'll get there tomorrow, and it'll be just fine. So, yeah.
Let's go. Well, speaking of picking up loads, I'd love to hear how we got here. What got your Fast Lane Felicia? How did you get into trucking? How did you become Fast Lane Felicia?
Well, lately I've been in the slow lane, to be honest with you, but hey, we'll get over there one day. No, a little bit about me. My whole life, it's always been about being in the fast lane. I come from a background of motocross and motorcycle racing and things like that. And that's been my whole life up until about 6 months ago. And my dream was, originally to drive semi trucks for a race team. And we're working on that, getting there and getting a little bit closer every day. And so, yeah, motocross background, coming up through the ranks with that, being around the industry and being around that industry, they comes, big trucks too, bringing those pro riders in and bringing in the show, for all those big events. And so throughout the years, I was like, man, that would be just so cool to be a part of that. And, women, unfortunately, women in, the motocross industry really don't get the same attention that the men get, and it's unfortunate, and it's something that is women are coming up through the ranks and they're being more recognized, but the part of actually being a part of like a factory team is very minimal. And so I ran that all through my 20s, and I really enjoyed it, and got to what I would call my pinnacle of my career in that, and I loved it. Met a lot of people, networking, and my 30s, it's been kind of all about career and making money and figuring out what career choice would best fit me, and kind of incorporate a little bit of everything. And I went and got my CDL and been trucking since June of this year, and it's awesome. I've been living on the road for the past 5 months, and it's been a learning curve and an adjustment, but I think it's something that everyone should experience at least once in their life. And now, moving on and past, I'm hoping to eventually be back in the racing scene, but in a different aspect. So not as the racer, but as more of like maybe a team driver or something like that. So it's hopefully it'll all come into play, if I can get in touch with the right people and everything like that. So
Yeah, I feel like, recently I had a conversation with somebody with some commercial pilots, and I think when people get into the airplane the careers, the dream would be to like fly a jet for like some billionaire or something like that. And it's but you have to not only be a good pilot, but you have to like you have to put yourself out there. You have to network. It's a really who type scenario. And so you could be this great pilot and you can fly for a commercial airline, but if you're not like well known, it really all depends. Like it's you have very good odds of like winning the lottery in that case. I think in the trucking world you can navigate your way to be, again, like the guys who drive for NASCAR. I was at Formula One recently, and I know that those guys have trucks that drive it. And I feel like just in this industry, if you want to find yourself doing one of those jobs, the more and more you kind of put yourself out there, is like those opportunities are going to come up, and the more you could just keep the longer you're just on the road and you're actually meeting people and you're on the internet, I think those opportunities can definitely pop up.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's that's one of the only reasons I got to where I was in my career with racing. Was it was all Unfortunately, it was all kind of who you meet and who you know, and navigate you through, getting to those certain races, meeting those certain people, and having a way in. And talent goes far, but kind of who you know really goes a little bit further. So
So I'd love to ask, like, because I always when I talk to drivers about this, there's always for a lot of people, there's sometimes an aha moment. Some people come to the industry, they're racing it, whether it be family, relatives, what like they kind of follow in that pathway. But for a lot of other people, good, trucker DC, he was on here a couple weeks ago. He was a chef, and was laid off during COVID. So there's always a different way, but a lot of times people will have an aha moment. I know in the racing side of things, the motocross world, you've met drivers, you've seen that side, which is also something to be said, again, to where no matter what industry people are in, again, trucks always touch everything. So it's like no matter what, you can't really get out of the way of having to deal with big trucks wherever you're at. But you knew, like you said earlier, you recognize like how cool it must have been. But was there a specific like aha moment where you're like, okay, this is it, I'm going to go from this to CDL instead of anything else? Because really there's plenty of ways to get into the industry. But was there like a certain like, was there something, like, was it a YouTube video or anything where you're like, man, you know what, or a driver you spoke with where you're like, that's it, like today I'm going to sign up for CDL school? What did that look like?
um I guess for me, it was kind of funny. I uh, I had went to Canada to race kind of if you will, I'll say it in my last oorah is how I put it in terms was, in 2023 I went on a 5-week tour with my fifth wheel to Canada, to a motocross tour, the women's professional racing up in Canada, because it was something I always wanted to do. And so I went on tour with my brother, and we went up there for 5 weeks and just lived at the tracks with the fifth wheel, and followed the tour around. And I had, at that time, more than ever in my career with racing, was the time that I really met several of the truck drivers, and they were all Canadian. And one of them was actually kind enough. I had blown a hydraulic line on my fifth wheel, what keeps the jacks from going up and down. And he had came over because my brother had to fly home for work, and he had came over and actually helped me replace that hydraulic line. One of the drivers, and he was also the flagger for the finish line, because it was kind of a small venue, at that point, at the very end. And I got to talking to him about it, and he said he had been driving for teams, not a single team, but for several teams, for about 20 years. And it was just really cool, and before that he had told me that he had raced. And so for me it was like, wow, this is going to be kind of my last go around with racing, at that level. I was like, I wonder how I could really put the two together. And so at that time I was like, maybe in about a year I'll go get my CDL. So 2 years later, actually, this this June, I ended up getting my CDL. So I would say that's kind of what pushed me into it. I'm not quite with a team yet or anything like that. That's the goal, but just getting the CDL and thinking and going, like thinking that's the end goal, was just really exciting. And so what kind of pushed me was just I had moved from Phoenix. I had quit my job that I was at for 10 years, and I left and I came up back to Colorado, where I'm from, and went back to school and got the CDL. So it was just kind of it was a couple things, I guess. It was a career change, and then also just, yeah, the aha moment would have had to be like just seeing how involved the truck drivers were with the racing. So I just thought it was a cool combo to be able to put two of my passions together. If that makes sense.
No, that's awesome. I love that pathway, that great way, and I love how it was a driver, like in true driver fashion, looking to, like, you could tell that guy's gotta have some old school blood in him to where he's like down to help somebody out. Um,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's something you'll hear older drivers talk about how guys, before ELDs, more people people helped a lot more, and I feel like in that side, like whether it be like music venue, like guys who tour with bands, and like the more, because things aren't as expedited, so to speak. I think in that side where it's not like going to shippers and receivers, drivers have a little bit more of that time to where I mean, the guy's he's waving the checkered flag at the finish line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was like, wow. And I just think that that was just a bonus for him, honestly. But that was really cool to see, because I was like, I'm like going around the track and go by the finish line. I'm like, hey, that's the guy that fixed my hydraulic line. When you're passing him. It
Yeah.
was kind
So
of funny.
let it be known to anybody watching that drivers are capable. They can not only drive the motocross vehicles there, they can help fix one of the one of the racers' fifth wheels, and then just go right out on the race line and officiate at the same time. Just
Yeah,
that CDL can get you. It opens up a lot of doors.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, mentioning your fifth wheel, I got to ask you, and then coming over the road starting in June. When was the first time you had heard about Truck Parking Club?
Actually, I had heard about Truck Parking Club in about April of this year. I had actually stored my fifth wheel in a storage lot that and this is before I got my CDLs, before I even started school. And I had stored my fifth wheel in a storage lot as I was looking for a lot to store my trailer so that way I could go over the road. So when I found it, I was like, went up to it, and there was a Truck Parking Club sign on it. And I was like, well, that's really cool. It's right next to the Love's Truck Stop. I wonder what that's about. And so I kind of researched it, and before I knew who you guys were, and I looked at it and looked you guys up, and I was like, well, that's a really cool idea, and also very brilliant, where the locations are, put, being right next to like a Love's Truck Stop, but yet you have a set spot. So I had seen it there and kind of did a little bit more research, and I think I kind of let it sit down for a couple of months until I actually put the trailer in there before I went over the road. And yeah, that's how I heard about you guys, and I thought it was a really cool deal, to see that there so close to all the amenities you need.
Yeah, the self storage market. As we come towards the end of the year, as Truck Parking Club, we've gone to a lot of. We've really, connected with a lot of people in the self storage space who've really, stepped up and stepped forward to participate in this mission. Like they see, because there's obviously a business for self storage. People have campers and RVs or extra vehicles, whatever they might be using it for. And a self storage facility happens to be a lot of times on a lot of vacant land because, again, buses could be there. I helped a friend of mine park his RV at one in Austin recently, and they have space. And then, these self-storage places also happen to be in areas that have amenities near them, and they've been great partners to add to, as we've added locations. A lot of them are coming from the self-storage side of which kind of is true to the crux of the mission, are working with existing landowners as opposed to going through the zoning and the legality of kind of building more building more truck parking locations in general, which people are doing, and we always want, we support and advocate for, the government, federal, state governments to do that. But in the immediate short term, we could build all the stuff we want, but yet we have these self-storage facilities, and here they are stepping up to the plate. So that's awesome. It's crazy. It's awesome to hear how organically you found it. And I know you've stayed at some of our locations recently. I'd love to hear about some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, throughout my travels, I have stayed at the one in Grand Junction. It actually worked out really well, Grand Junction, Colorado. That one really worked out well. I stayed there pretty recently, over the past couple weeks. I had a big hunting trip planned with some friends of mine, not too far away from that location, and they don't have a big enough place to park the truck there, and it's like 60 miles away. And so I ended up actually parking the truck in there for a couple of nights because we were gone for the whole weekend. And I just really didn't and what I'm talking about is it was an extended stay, obviously. And the reason why I parked it there specifically was because I didn't want to leave it at the Love's truck stop, without being secured, because this one was fully gated with cameras and lights and everything, and close by to home. So I really liked the idea of that. So I had left it there for a couple days, came back, no issues. So it was really, really convenient. I don't know, I would have been worried about it the whole time otherwise, like somebody breaking in, if I had to just, park it at a truck stop. And then I've also stayed at the one in Parowan, just there right off the I-15 in Utah. That one was a little different because it was off the road a little ways, but all inclusive with like a storage unit, but it wasn't fenced. So it was like you were able to get like really big like trucks in there, like if you had like heavy haul or oversized loads. And so that one was really convenient. So the diversity of even just the ones that I've stayed at, just because I am in the Western 11 mostly with the account that I'm on right now. Just the all the difference, like there's some at truck stops, like the one in Price, Utah. That was another good one that I stayed at. It's really nice Chevron with, the bathrooms and showers and everything. And so it's nice, the diversity that you guys have with these lots, and where they're at and where they're located, because they're usually really close to like facilities and things like that, like showers, if not already on the same property, along with like some of the Flying J's and things like that. So that was really helpful to me, especially like I've been pulling a trailer that's of similar size for several years, but sometimes for newer drivers that have never pulled anything in their life and they're still fairly new to, getting used to like a big truck and trailer, 70-foot rig. Sometimes it's nice to be able to have a space where you can park and you don't have to try to squeeze in between two trucks, when you're fairly new. I know a lot of people that have used Truck Parking Club now because it's a little bit more secluded for them to be able to make sure they have a spot so they don't have to stress about parking. So that's something I've heard from other drivers that are fairly new.
Yeah, that you actually bring up a good point, because everybody, when it comes to parking a truck, the most obvious, or the first, the best parking spot you can get is the best way to park a truck is just to pull through. Like when you can pull through into a spot, like it is the most, it's like an automatic time saver. Like and that could be if you're at a truck stop, like if you're at a T or Love's, like if you're like, I just know this from like when I would get lunch or something on a 30-minute break, and it's like the middle of the day and the truck stops aren't full, and you can kind of just swing through the lot and then just pull right into the space, and then you're straight, and then boom, you freaking pull the tab and go. And I think that's kind of an unspoken benefit of a lot of Truck Parking Club locations is you're right. It's just a simple, you kind of just pull in. You don't got to worry about maybe possibly doing something blindside. Yeah, you don't got to worry about dinging anything, especially if you're brand new. You bring a good point to the table. Now, you said you you operate mainly in the Western 11, and I feel like the majority of drivers would probably agree. It's you're talking about because a lot of the Western 11 is, for the most part, that's nature. It's untouched. What's been your favorite? What's been your kind of favorite route? What's been your favorite places to drive through, or like what's the coolest place you've been through if it's in the Western 11?
I would say in the Western 11, as far as beauty goes, Utah's beautiful, obviously, and that's majority of what I run is like through Utah and then down to California, like where I'm at now. But I would say like, and I'm gonna say this because I did it in the summer, not the winter time. But the one of the prettiest routes that I've been to on this account was probably going up towards Great Falls, Montana. There was a store that we had to drop off up there, and just coming back, there was a really nice pull off area right there, and I can't remember what highway that is, but it was just so beautiful. And of course, that's not something I'd want to be doing this time of year right now, with all the snow and everything. But like just going up there and just seeing that beautiful scenery was amazing. I grew up in Colorado, so I mean, I'm used to seeing mountains and beautiful scenery, but that was the pull off that I was at, which was almost to Great Falls, Montana, just south, was just amazing. And I actually ended up pulling the truck over and making breakfast there in the truck, and then just hanging out there for like 30 minutes, and it was just really, really tranquil and really nice. I really enjoyed it. And other than that, I would have to say probably going up over US 6 from Utah over to Grand Junction. And it's not fun in the wintertime because I've already had to drive over it once with snow, but just going up the mountain passes and seeing all the colors and the leaves changing and everything like that was super, super amazing. So
No, those it's great to highlight those areas. Yeah, those are truly underrated. And to be perfectly honest, it's kind of, for as tough of a job as driving is, it's still the biggest privilege is to be able. I'm from the Northeast originally, and I've got friends who have quote unquote traveled, but they'll never see those kind of untouched corners of places like Utah and even some of those other parts of Colorado or Montana or Wyoming. They'll just never have a they'll never have a purpose to go out there. You mentioned when you were up in at that part in Montana cooking breakfast. Definitely want to ask you this, especially because you've basically been on the road the entire time you started driving, and it's important. And every single newsletter I drop every Monday, I put like a little health tip in there, whether it's about something you could be doing for mobility or what have you. But you mentioned cooking breakfast. Would love to hear how you've been taking care of your health and staying active, and what your food looks like while you're out there.
yeah, I will say that was probably one of my biggest hurdles that I was worried about overcoming with being a truck driver, because everybody associates, truck driving with obesity. Um, I'll be honest, I was a little worried about it at first, but I already had a pretty good routine in place prior to truck driving as far as the gym, how my body operates and what foods to eat and things like that. The problem I didn't know was how to make a tiny fridge work. How was I going to cook my food and avoid truck stop food? And how was I going to find the time to do it? I would say, you know, I mean, it's like I had bought a hot plate, and that's what I used, and that's what I am using. And I would bring just like a pan, like a single pan. But a lot of my meals consisted of just a high protein, a lot of, hamburger meat, things like that, chicken, rice, stuff that you can easily make, just while you're on the road. And, we put long hours in. That's the last thing anybody wants to do is cook. So what I would do is and what I do is I would get, meal prep containers, and I would just make some rice up, just microwavable minute rice, because it's still better than a cheeseburger, and one of those rotisserie chickens that you get from like Walmart that are like $7. Take it all off and then just meal prep it, in like 4 containers. And that's meals for like 2 or 3 days, depending on how much people eat. But as far as the gym goes, getting in the gym is a little bit more difficult than what I was hoping. The company that I work for, they allow, or at some of their terminals, they have gyms and things like that you're able to use. But the chances of getting to one of those every day is very slim to none. So what I had taken to was resistance bands. And because they're lightweight, you can pretty much put them anywhere. They don't take up a lot of room. And I would have different, resistance bands. So I would be able to tie them to certain parts in the truck or even outside of the truck and do different workouts. So it was all something I was able to adapt to and still heck, I haven't gained any weight. So I've actually lost 5 pounds. And so that was kind of crazy, actually. But yeah, I mean, that was my main concern when I got into trucking, was how I was going to maintain my health, because that's number one, through and through. If you're not taking care of yourself, there's no sense in doing a job. And that's the way I look at it. And so also, with kind of using and maximizing my clock, since we do have ELDs now and, a clock to abide by, trying to limit what things I didn't have to worry about came in clutch. I'm going to call it clutch because that's what it's a good moto term. Came in clutch. And that's why when I found you guys, it was actually really helpful, because I already knew where I was parking. I didn't have to worry about spending an hour finding parking. So therefore I could use my own hour of my own time to prep and get parked, and maybe even find somewhere that's actually nice to go for a walk, and take the dogs out. I have 2 dogs, and so we'll get out and hike and do what we can during the day. But yeah, so that's kind of how I overcome it. It was not easy. I've shared some of those tips in my YouTube channel. A lot of people like them, and looking forward to sharing more. It's just been kind of crazy lately. So yeah.
No, you're absolutely right to keep it on the forefront of your mind. Again, yeah, if you're, I love that quote that you just used, like basically saying, like, if you're there's no point in working a job if you're not going to take care of yourself, because taking care of yourself is what's going to allow you to perform at your best, both physically and mentally. That's well said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of going into my last question, and I know you kind of just been sinking your teeth into it, but once you're really, once you're past 3 months in, and you've been on the road for some time, and you're active on social media. um I always ask people, besides parking, at least in your kind of point of view, and you've seen it on the other side. You've worked with drivers before in the previous industry, in the motocross industry. You know it from their end, but now being on this side of it, being behind the wheel, what do you think is one of the largest issues? What do you think is the biggest issue going on in the industry, or what's something that you would want to fix immediately?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, aside from the parking, I would say the biggest issue facing myself and, obviously a lot of drivers, most of the drivers out there, is the pay. Um, the pay is, everyone always says, well, if you don't like what you're doing, change it, right? Or if you don't, if you're gonna talk bad about it, the pay, or do something different. The problem is, you know, we sleep in our trucks, we eat in our trucks, we brush our teeth half the time in our trucks. Um, the pay isn't even nearly enough for the hours that we put in, and the hours that we're away from home and loved ones and things like that, and all the different things that we miss: birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, all that stuff. Um, and when you come down to it, and you divide out, not you're not dividing out the hours that you're sleeping, but you're dividing out the hours that you spend. If you maximize your clock, right, 14 hours, and you divide that out by, the mileage ran in that day, a lot of times you're making 15, 16 bucks an hour. And you're making 15, 16 bucks an hour to operate an 80,000 pound vehicle, or maybe even a heavier vehicle. And that's a lot of liability, and I just really feel like some drivers, unfortunately, don't take it seriously as they should, because they look at the money they're making and they don't take that seriously either. So I would say, yeah, something. I knew coming into it as a new driver, I wasn't expecting to make, 80,000, not even 6 figures, nowhere around there, my first year, and it's just fine. But for a lot of people, they've been in it for 4 to 5, maybe even 6 years, and they're still kind of fighting with, the amount of money they can make and things like that. And so I hope with, maybe with some of these new laws that you had mentioned in the beginning of this episode, maybe some of that might change, for some of these drivers, and maybe open up a few more jobs for, the obvious reasons, for people to be able to jump in and maybe start their career in trucking and have a positive outlook on, being able to make, good money for what they're doing. because it is a big responsibility, and I don't think that drivers are really compensated fairly, given what their responsibilities are.
Absolutely, and you're not alone in that. A couple weeks ago, American Transportation Research Institute shared the same thing. That is the number one concern amongst drivers is the pay. And yeah, when it comes to driver pay, um, again, a lot of people who've been in the industry a while, again, getting into niches is definitely where the pay starts to increase. However, niches are what they are, and they're also hard to get into. I mean, I know the best job in Texas is to be a local fuel hauler. Those are also some of the hardest jobs to get because they don't have turnover. Same thing with heavy haul companies. I remember talking to a larger carrier a couple of years ago in Kansas City in their recruiting department, and they have a recruiter who works in their heavy haul division. They have a dry van too, and that recruiter, he's got kind of a pretty autopilot job because they're very seldom looking for drivers. So the niches don't suffer from the turnover like the general freight does. And again, when we have the issues we have, when year over year, um, if retention and pay are among the top issues, and then we also have these major safety concerns. I mean, that's kind of where a lot of problems can stem from. And yeah, in the newsletter, people have their opinions over AB5. And for anybody who's listening, AB5 essentially is like an independent contractor law that California has enacted. It has to do with classifying workers, and it kind of doesn't allow, it doesn't allow the model of hiring like 1099 drivers, to put it in short terms. It has to do with, and a lot of that AB5 actually stemmed from the gig economy of like Uber drivers and tattoo artists, barber shops. And so it's kind of a mixed, there's mixed reactions to it because on one hand, you do have a lot of people who are working jobs that come with no benefits, but on the other hand, there's a lot of people who are taking advantage from it. So it's like there's good and bad. But on the trucking side, I have to look at this, and for drivers who do think, and again, people are hesitant when it comes to government legislation or reaction. But I know this from working in a warehouse, that if you're a brand new warehouse worker, where I worked, like you automatically got 2 weeks of PTO. That was one of the benefits. And the standard in the trucking industry, like the first company I drove for, you didn't get 1 week of PTO until after you drove for them for a year. And that's a lot of the standard throughout a lot of companies. So you don't even get a week of PTO until that year. And then not only that, when you take PTO as an over the road driver, you're not paid what you would actually be driving for that week. You're paid off of this um, this statistical hourly scale. So you're not even going to get the weekly paycheck that you would normally get from driving. And so that has there's causes and effects to that definitely lead to some of the issues that we're having. So you're definitely not alone in the driver pay, Mark. Last question for you though. I mean, even though you got into this in June, if you were to talk to Felicia 6 months ago, what would be the advice you would give them? So if you were to talk to a new driver, somebody who's just like you, about to get their CDL, what's a little piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I to give myself and to any new drivers out there or anybody thinking, to get in their CDL, anytime soon, would be to, stay open-minded. Um, you know, don't do something for the money because that only goes so far. And I would say is specifically with trucking, what I've learned in my short time, because I wanted to go over the road coast to coast. And that was what I had my mind set on, was doing over the road coast to coast, swinging doors. And the best thing I did was getting on with a dedicated account, where we have dedicated runs, dedicated places that we go, and dedicated, mileage. And so that has been so consistent in this 5 months that I've been driving. I would absolutely go back and tell myself, no, you are not doing over the road coast to coast. And I would say, absolutely get on with a dedicated account if possible. And they are available out there with, little to no experience, because that's what I did. And so a lot of people will say, no, you can't get on dedicated. You got to have XYZ experience. That's not always the case. So that would be my advice just in the short time I've been driving would be, yeah, don't expect the world, stay open-minded, and, get on a dedicated account if you can, and so you can get that consistency. So,
No, that's a good piece of advice. I think the perk of a dedicated account, and that could be whether you work for a small or large carrier, is you get to know those customers and you become somebody who starts to enhance the business of the carrier you drive for, as well as those customers. It helps build relationships. So, yeah, no, solid piece of advice. Number one, Felicia, wanted to thank you for coming on tonight, joining the clubhouse. Definitely won't be the last time, especially because we're going to, in the very near future, I'm predicting you will be driving for some of these racers, whether that be in motocross or wherever. And we got to get the inside baseball on that.
absolutely. Yes. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, for sure. Well, yeah, I'll walk this one out. For those of you guys tune in, number one, thank you for checking out the clubhouse. Again, we're here every Monday night, normally around 7:30. Had a little bit of a late start. If you haven't already, again, Taillights is in your inbox. Definitely go check it out. We cover some of the topics we were just talking about, especially regarding AV5. And if you've been listening for the last 36 minutes, you know that Felicia is somebody who's entered this industry and wants to leave it better than we found it, which is exactly why we partner with her. At Truck Parking Club, our mission is to also leave the industry better than we found it by helping truckers save time and fuel, thus money, by instantly reserving truck parking all across the United States. And if you need truck parking tonight or anytime this week, again, right at the bottom of the screen, you can use the promo code FLF20, FLF20, all capital letters, for $20 off your next booking. But with that, guys, we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Hammer down.